Hey, welcome back. And this is part two with the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. And so where we left off was about Europe being really divided territorially, and the only thing that most Europeans had in common was being Christian or Catholic. And so since the Pope was the leader, he became the unofficial ruler of Europe and had a lot more power and influence than today's popes, as they could do and tell kings what to do. So what else made the church very powerful? Well, most Catholics at the time, okay, remember everybody in Europe, if once you were Jewish or you were a Muslim minority, tried to follow church rules because everybody was Catholic. So you're trying to follow church rules in order to achieve salvation. And salvation is very important in a lot of religious groups, and a lot of denominations. Very important in the Catholic faith, and be able to get to heaven. So, because life wasn't very great for most people, okay, because remember, this is the Middle Ages, especially for most peasants. You never travel outside your town. You're eating like the worst of the food in the manor. Every day you're out there working in the fields for the most part, and life is just really, really bad, and um, it's not going great. And so heaven was a big goal, because that's where people felt they could achieve peace and achieve rest. And, it was much, much better on earth. And the church was really pushing that heaven is where you want to be. And people were really afraid of going to hell because the Catholic Church teaches, that hell is real and that people go there. And that's still teaching today. But people were really afraid of being sent to hell. And so by God. And so they believed that heaven was where they wanted to be. And so to receive the sacraments and to, follow the laws of the church was a really big deal. And so most people, including peasants at the time, had to pay a tax to the church called a tithe. And so the tithe that you pay would be 10% of their wealth, which, so for someone who is rich, 10% is still a significant amount of money. But also think about someone who is, like poor, like a peasant. If you only have like $10 and you lose one of those dollars, then that's still a fair amount of money that's gone. Because you don't have a lot that's lying around afterwards to help support your family. And so then also what made the church very, very powerful, and this is important, is that nobles often gave land and money to the church. So the land that they owned, for in their manor, often upon death, they would give it to the church as well as a lot of money through a tithe, and also as just general donations in the hopes that that would help them get to heaven. And altogether, this makes the church incredibly wealthy and powerful because they're receiving money from every single Christian within Europe, whether it's through tithe, whether it's through land, whether it's through money. This makes the church very wealthy, gives them a lot of power because they can influence all that medieval Christians are doing at this time. And so they dictated a lot about the daily lives of medieval Europeans. Oops, let me go back one. And what else made the church influential? Well, the church officials were often the most educated. So even like the nobles who were incredibly rich weren't that educated. So only the church officials mainly were the ones who received the best education. They were usually the most well read, and so many people relied on them because they couldn't read. The vast majority of people in medieval Europe couldn't read; they could barely write. Education was just not even a thought outside just small religious education to kind of know like the basics about the faith. And almost all literature and art was about religion and the church. So everything that was coming out for the most part that people could read or could view was about God and was about religion. And all who were educated, so let's say you were rich enough or high enough in the nobility, for the most part, you were taught by the Catholic Church. So you were influenced through church teachings and church education. And almost all in Europe lived to serve God in the church. So again, since they all have this in common and everybody serves the Pope, or looks up to the Pope, that gives the church a lot of power and a lot of influence to be able to do what it does um, daily. Now, the church also had a group of people who were called religious life. And this is a big deal within medieval Europe because a lot of these religious orders, because some people in the church started to see that, the wealth and the power and the influence that the church was gaining was starting to become a bad thing. And it did become a bad thing because it became like overgrown and too corrupt. And so there were people in religious life who wanted to serve the church and the people of the church, so Christians, while staying very humble, while using the things that they have to help serve the people. And so religious life was made of men who were called monks and women who were called nuns who served different orders. And so different orders had different purposes and different things. Like some focused on education, some focused more on, like running hospitals, or some focused more on, um, preaching and converting those who weren't Christian. But they all had different rules. But they all vowed to, one, never to marry and to follow the vow of celibacy. Two, never to own property. So they would never own any land, like a fief that was given to a vassal or something. So they gave up any land that they had, and that was called poverty. So they lived very poor. They weren't necessarily like broke, but they lived a very like humble lifestyle without poverty, meaning that they're not going to own anything. They're not going to accumulate wealth, and any wealth that they do have, they give to their order. And then they also vow to never disobey their superior, so the people who are above them. So this is about obedience. And so it's a very strict kind of lifestyle, but it attracted a lot of people because it held a very good way of serving God in the church. And there are loads of religious today, all throughout the world. Even in North Carolina, there's a few religious orders. Today, for example, I know at Our Lady of Lourdes in Midtown Raleigh, there is a group of nuns that they might run a school, for example, because that's how they viewed serving the church in the religious life. Whether it's to form schools, running a hospital, and a lot of times just like the simplest thing is writing, copying books. You might say, well, that's weird. Why would they serve the church by writing and copying books? Well, this is a time that there's no printing press. There's no, way to mass copy a book like we do today. There's no factories or anything. And so the only way to rewrite a book is to actually hand write it. So think about all the Bibles that are around today. Like you go into a hotel and you see Bibles, or even in a store. The only way that gets done way back then was if monks or nuns were going to actually write down the books, handwritten every single page. And some of them, that's what they did all their lives while serving the church. So that's a really big deal to be able to do that, which also means that all culture and anybody who could actually read, they're going to read something that was written by a monk, which mostly would have been religious works like the Bible. And then what else did the church do is that they built these massive churches, often cathedrals in a Gothic architecture style. The most famous is the Notre Dame in Paris, and which had that big fire not that long ago. And it's something that's dictated in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, whether the movie or the book. Incredibly beautiful churches, incredible, just grand scale, amazing stained glass, just giant churches that were built for that style, which were been kind of uncommon that day. These were most found in the big cities, and then this is the one in Milan, the Milan Cathedral, which is just massive and in a big Gothic style, and then which inspired a lot of the people. And these are impressive churches when you go to see them. And then St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a Dominican monk, who inspired this idea called scholasticism. And this is kind of the idea that he was trying to take the reasoning back from the Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato, and be able to unite them with faith, because a lot of times when you look at philosophy, it doesn't always match up to the idea of religious teachings, like the Christian teachings. And so Aquinas wanted to put them together, and that's what he did with scholasticism. And he was incredibly smart, incredibly well written, because he also wrote what was called the Summa Theologica. And Summa Theologica was the summarizing of the Catholic Church teachings. And to give you an idea about his kind of style, what he would do was he would take a point and he would say, that, it's like, say, maybe God created the world. And he would argue it one side about, like, yes, God created the world, but then he also argued the other side, like, no, God didn't create the world. And then coming to the point about which one is right. And really just expansive. It's nearly 3,000 pages long, so it gets you an idea just how vast he went into these things and how in depth he went. And that's why he's one of the most famous saints today, St. Thomas Aquinas, because of his writings, because how well he detailed the teachings of the Catholic Church. That's all I have. So that would be the end of part 2. If you have any questions, just let me know. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and good luck with the rest of your guided notes. Have a great day, and bye.